A Canticle for Leibowitz. Part 2 of a series in 15 parts, adapted from a novel by Walter Miller, Jr. A Canticle for Leibowitz. Here continueth the chronicle, set down daily by the brethren of blessed Isaac Edward Leibowitz, in their abbey in the desert of the southwest. This is our daily task, that we live according to the holy rule, chanting the divine office and living in poverty, chastity, and obedience and conversion of life, as befits a monk. But also that we inscribe these chronicles, that a record remain of each generation in its time. And chiefly are we charged that a record remain of that great age which prospered in the days before the flame deluge, before the world was laid waste by the great engines of war, and the earth fell prey to the demon fallout. And to that end we preserve all books and writings from those days, and memorize them, lest they perish, that their wisdom may live on unto whatever generation may seek it out. This chronicle concerns itself here with one of our memorizers, by name Brother Francis Gerard. He it was who, spending the Lenten vigil of his novitiate outside the walls of the abbey, in solitude in the desert, built himself a hut, lest he be devoured by wolves at night. And this hut he built from stones that lay to his hand, for there were in that place ruins, where once had stood the buildings of men, before warfare laid them low. And in the gathering of these stones he was helped by a pilgrim, who came that way on his journey, and had speech with him, and nigh broke his fast with an offering of food, and sought out on his behalf the keystone of his roof. And this same Brother Francis, after the pilgrim had departed, found in the place where the keystone had been a passageway descending into the earth, where there was much rubble and fallen rock, which nevertheless he was able to pass by, and so enter an ancient room beneath the ground. And this room had within it an inner sanctum, and the door thereto was sealed. And on that door there was writing in great letters, and this is the writing that was written: Fallout, Survival, Shelter. And outside the door, at his feet, there lay a skull, and in the skull one of the teeth shined, for it was of gold.
It was a fact recorded in the memorabilia. The founder's wife, Emily Leibowitz, had had a gold tooth. This did not occur to Francis when he came upon the skull. His mind was filled with the possibility of finding ancient documents. His eyes fell on a rusty box, shaped like a satchel, obviously a carrying case of some kind, rather badly battered. Gingerly, he worked it loose from the rubble. The lid had rusted shut. The box rattled when he shook it. Not an obvious place to look for books or papers, but it might contain a scrap or two for the memorabilia. He battered at the rusty hinges with a stone. The lid fell free. Small ceramic cylinders with wires at each end bounced from trays, spilled among the rocks, some of them falling into crevices. But in the bottom of the box,
papers. Deo gracias.
He gathered up the scattered tidbits as best he could. With the box hugged under one arm, he climbed the hill of debris toward the thin patch of sky. The sun was blinding after the darkness of the hole. He searched for a flat slab of stone to spread the contents of the box. Inside the lid, a note had been glued. The glue had powdered, the ink faded, and the paper was so darkened by rusty stains that even good handwriting would have been hard to read. But this was written in a hasty scrawl.
Carl, must grab plane for,
The place name was indecipherable.
For God's sake, keep M there till we know if we're at war. Please, try to get her on the alternate list for the shelter. Don't tell her why I sent her over with this box of junk, but try to keep her there till we know...
The next phrase was also indecipherable. The note was signed with 3 initials.
L. I-E-L.
And there was a postscript.
I told M this was top secret, just to keep her from looking inside. First toolbox I happened to grab, shoved it in my locker or something.
It was gibberish to Francis. Impatient with the note writer's scrawl, he began removing the trays to get at the papers in the bottom of the box. Only a handful, and yet a treasure, for they'd escaped the flames of the simplification. He handled the papers as holy things, shielding them from the wind. All were brittle and cracked from age. There was a sheaf of rough sketches and diagrams. There were hand-scribbled notes, 2 large folded papers, and a small book entitled Memo. First he examined the notes, scrawled by the same hand that had written the note glued inside the lid. The penmanship was no less abominable.
Pound pastrami, canned kraut, 6 bagels. Bring home for Emma.
Another one read,
Remember, pick up Form 1040, Uncle Revenue.
Another was only a column of figures with a circled total, from which a second amount was subtracted, and finally a percentage taken, followed by one word, damn.
Damn.
He checked the figures.
6 and
He could find no fault with the penman's arithmetic, at least, although he could tell nothing about what the quantities might represent. Memo he handled with a special reverence, because its title was suggestive of memorabilia.
The works of our hands and our
Before
minds,
opening it,
please, thy
he
right
crossed himself
be
and
always
murmured the
acceptable in
blessing
thy
of
sight, O
texts.
Lord, our strength and our Redeemer.
But the small book was a disappointment. He'd expected printed matter, but found only a handwritten list of names, places, numbers, and dates.
October 7th, 1972. February 15th, 1978. July 26th, 1983. Oh, well, that proves it. It's all 20th century.
The contents of the box came from the twilight period of the Age of Enlightenment. Of the larger folded papers, one was tightly rolled as well. It began to fall apart when he tried to unroll it. He could make out only 2 words at the top.
Racing form.
He turned to the second folded document. Its creases were so brittle he dared inspect only a little of it by parting the folds slightly and peering between them.
A diagram.
A diagram, it seemed, but a diagram of white lines on dark paper.
A blueprint.
There was not a single original blueprint left at the Abbey, only facsimiles. Originals had faded long ago from overexposure to light. He shielded the print from the sun while trying to unfold it further. In the lower right-hand corner was a printed rectangle containing in simple block letters various titles, dates, patent numbers, reference numbers, and names. His eye traveled down the list until it encountered Circuit Design.
Circuit Design by Leibowitz.
He closed his eyes and shook his head. Then he looked again. There it was, quite plainly. Circuit Design
by Leibowitz. I.E.
He looked again at the initial signature of the note in the lid of the box. I.E.L. And again at Circuit Design by... And the same initials appeared elsewhere, throughout the notes.
Blessed Leibowitz.
His hands were trembling. They threatened to ruin the brittle documents. He had uncovered relics of the saint. Of course, New Rome had not yet proclaimed Leibowitz a saint, but Francis was convinced.
Saint Leibowitz.
Had he been granted a token of his vocation by heaven itself? Yes. He felt he'd found what he'd been sent into the desert to find. He felt he was called to be a professed monk. Twilight came, and the wolves as well. His fire was rekindled. There'd been no time to gather purple cactus fruit, his only source of nourishment, except on Sundays, when a handful of parched corn was sent from the abbey, after the prior had made his rounds with the Holy Sacrament. Tonight, though, the gnawing of hunger was less troublesome than his urge to run back to the abbey and announce the news of his discovery. But to do so would be to renounce his vocation no sooner than it had come to him. He was here for the duration of Lent, vocation or no vocation. Dreamily, from near the fire, he squinted into the darkness in the direction of the fallout survival shelter and tried to visualize a towering basilica rising from the site. Well, maybe not a basilica. Too far off the beaten track for that. But if not a basilica, at least a church, a smaller one, with a garden and a wall around it, and a shrine of St. Leibowitz. That would bring the pilgrims. Yes, pilgrims out of the north with girded loins. And Father Francis would conduct them on a tour of the ruins, even through Hatch 2, into the splendors of sealed environment. Beyond, the catacombs of the flame deluge. And then, afterwards, he would offer Mass for them on the altar stone, which would be set on top of a relic of the saint. Yes, a relic. A bit of burlap. Or perhaps racing form. The fantasy withered. Chances of his becoming a priest were slight. The brothers of Leibowitz needed only a few. Furthermore, the saint was only a beatus, would never be declared a saint unless New Rome took more interest in the case. The fantasy church dwindled to a wayside shrine. The river of pilgrims shrank to a trickle. Francis drowsed. When he awoke, the fire was only embers. Something seemed amiss. Was he quite alone? He blinked at the darkness. Beyond the bed of reddish coals, a wolf blinked back. He dived for cover into his stone hut, where he lay hugging the metal box and praying the days of Lent might pass swiftly, while padded feet scratched about his enclosure. Sunday came, and with it Prior Cherokee, riding a mare, carrying the host to Francis, and hearing his confession.
And then, Father, I almost took the bread and cheese.
But you didn't take it?
No.
Then there was no sin by deed.
But I wanted it so badly. I could taste it.
Willfully? Did you deliberately enjoy the fantasy?
No.
You tried to get rid of it?
Oh, yes.
So? There was no culpable gluttony of thought?
Well, no,
Father Cherokee stared at the boy who knelt in profile before him in the scorching sunlight.
Well, therefore,
This confession was taking up quite a lot of time.
There can be no sin.
The priest's arthritis was bothering him again. But because of the presence of the Holy Sacrament, he preferred to stay on his knees along with the penitent. He'd lighted a candle before the small golden case containing the hosts.
Yes, well,
But the flame was invisible in the sun glare, and the breeze might even have blown it out.
Now, what next?
Gluttonous thoughts.
My boy, I thought we were through with that.
Oh,
is this another time?
Yesterday.
I see.
There was this lizard, Father.
This what?
A lizard. It had blue and yellow stripes, and thick as your thumb, plump. I kept thinking how it would taste like chicken, all roasted brown and crisp outside, and
All right.
tender. And
All right. You took pleasure in these thoughts? You didn't try to get rid of the temptation?
I tried to catch it.
I see.
It got away.
So, not merely thought, deed as well. Just that one time?
Well, yes, just that.
All right. In thought and deed, willfully meaning to eat meat during Lent. Please be as specific as you can after this. I thought you'd examined your conscience properly. Is there anything else?
Quite a lot.
Then please get on with it as quickly as you can.
Impurity. Once.
Thought, word, or deed?
Well, there was this succubus, and she...
Succubus?
Yes.
Oh, nocturnal. You were asleep.
Yes.
Well, then why confess it?
Well, because afterwards...
Afterwards what? When you woke up?
Yes. I kept thinking about her. I kept imagining it all over again.
All right. Concupiscent thought deliberately entertained you. Sorry?
Oh, yes.
Now, what next?
All this was the usual sort of thing one kept hearing, time after endless time, from postulant after postulant, novice after novice.
No.
It seemed to Cherokee the least Francis could do would be to bark out his self-accusations, 1, 2, 3, in a neat, orderly manner, without all this prodding and prompting. Now the boy seemed to be having more difficulty.
I think my vocation has come to me,
Oh,
Father.
has it?
Yes. But, well, would it be a sin, Father, if, when I first got it, I thought rather scornfully of the handwriting? I mean...
Have you and Brother Alfred been passing notes to each other?
Oh, no, Father, no.
Well, whose handwriting are we talking about?
The Blessed Leibowitz.
Cherokee paused, tried to remember. Was there in the memorabilia any manuscript penned personally by the founder of the order? Yes. There were a few scraps of it, carefully kept under lock and key.
Are you talking about something that happened back at the Abbey before you came out here?
No, Father. It happened right over there in the ruins, 3 mounds over, near the tall cactus.
Involving your vocation, you say?
Yes.
Of course,
but
just a minute. You could not possibly be trying to say that you have received from the Blessed Leibowitz, dead the last 600 years, a handwritten invitation to profess your solemn vows, and you deplored his handwriting? Forgive me, but that's the impression I'm getting.
Well, it is something like that, Father.
Brother Francis produced a scrap of paper from his sleeve and handed it to the priest.
Pound pastrami, can kraut, 6 bagels, bring home for Emma? This was written by whom?
The Blessed Leibowitz.
Son, you're not in your right mind.
But...
We'll talk it over after you're better. For the
Blessed
present, I want you to gather up your things and go back to the Abbey at once.
But Father...
Go back to the Abbey at once.
Yes, Father.
All right. You know my apologies. Et fideo.
The priest blessed him, got up, genuflected before the sacrament, reattached it to a chain around his neck, pocketed the candle, collapsed the table, strapped it in place behind the saddle, gave Francis a last solemn nod, and rode away to complete the circuit of the Lenten hermitages. Francis sat in the hot sand and wept. He could not blame Father Cherokee for leaping to the conclusion that he'd gone out of his mind. More than one novice had addled wits after a vocational vigil in the desert. There was nothing to do but obey the command to return. He walked to the fallout survival shelter, looked into it again to reassure himself it was really there. Then he went to get the box. By the time he had it repacked and was ready to leave, a dust plume had appeared in the southeast. The supply carrier was coming with water and corn from the Abbey. Francis decided to wait for his supplies before starting on the long trek home. 3 donkeys and a monk at the head of the dust streamer, the monk riding the lead donkey. The monk's shoulders were hunched, and the long, hairy shins dangled on either side of the donkey. In spite of the hood, Francis recognized him, the cook's helper.
Brother Fingo?
Oh, there you are, Francisco. I mistook you for a bone pile. Help yourself to the Sunday slops. How goes the hermit trade? Think you'll make it a career? Hey, boy. You look like a sick sheep. What's the trouble? Is Father Cherokee in one of his slow rages again?
Not that I could tell.
And what's wrong? Are you really sick?
He ordered me back to the Abbey.
Oh, what is it? The jaundice?
No. He thinks I'm crazy.
Well, that's true. We all knew that. Why is he sending you back?
Francis glanced down at the box near his feet.
I found some things that belonged to the blessed Leibowitz. I started to tell him, but he didn't believe me. He wouldn't let me explain. He just said,
You
back
found
to...
what?
Well, this, for instance.
Fingo dropped to his knees and opened the box while Francis watched nervously. Fingo stirred the small ceramic cylinders that had wire whiskers at each end. These he had seen before. The Abbey's small museum had a few of them of various sizes and shapes and colors. Once he'd seen a shaman of the hill pagan people wearing a string of them as a ceremonial necklace. The similar tidbits in the museum were connected together too, not in the form of a necklace, but as a complex maze in the bottom of a small metal frame exhibited as radio chassis, application uncertain.
Oh, this is old, Francisco. This is really old.
He glanced at the handwritten scribble of the note inside the lid.
What's this gibberish?
It was written by the Beatus himself.
This?
Fingo stared from the note to Francis and back to the note. He shook his head, clamped the lid back on the box, and stood up.
Well, maybe Father's right. You better hike back. Get Brother Pharmacist to brew you up a toadstool special. You got the fever, brother.
Maybe.
Where did you find this stuff anyway?
Over that way a few mounds. I moved some rocks, there was a cave-in, and I found a basement. But go see for yourself.
No, I got a long ride ahead.
Francis picked up the box and started toward the Abbey. But after a few paces, he stopped and called back.
Brother Fingo?
Yeah?
Could you take 2 minutes?
What for?
Walk over there and look into the hole.
Why?
So you can tell Father Cherokee if it's really there.
All right. And if it's not there, I'll tell you.
Francis watched for a moment while the gangling Fingo rode out of sight among the mounds. Then he turned to shuffle down the long, dusty trail toward the Abbey, munching corn and sipping from the water skin. Occasionally he glanced back. Then...
Hey, Francisco! You're right! Yeah, it's here!
Francis waved, then hiked wearily on his way back to the Abbey. Two weeks of near starvation had exacted their toll. After 2 or 3 miles, he began to stagger. Then, while still a mile from the Abbey, he fainted beside the road. It was late afternoon before Cherokee, riding back from his rounds, noticed Francis lying there, hastily dismounted, and gradually brought him around. Cherokee had encountered the supply donkeys on his way back. had paused to hear Fingo's account, which had confirmed Brother Francis's find.
Francis, mind you, I still don't think it could be anything really important.
Then he noticed the box lying nearby, with its contents half spilled in the road. One thing was obvious.
Well, the stuff's real enough. You just let your imagination run away with you.
Yes, Father.
He was too weak to insist on anything.
Christe